right. Hey, John. Hey, Jesse. Sam. Thanks for joining. So I am John Beckmann. I'm a U.S. Senate candidate in Alabama for the GOP primary. Today, I'm going to talk about doubling the NIH budget. So every morning, I'm going to try to do a couple 3-minute videos to try to define my policy points. So if you're wanting to know what I stand for, you can stop in the morning and I will each day give you something new that I stand for. So first, let's talk about doubling the NIH budget. So what is the NIH? So the NIH is the National Institute of Health. The U.S. government started funding science, essentially, that helps people's health. And they do this through the mechanism of the government agency, the National Institutes of Health. So for instance, if you worry about, say, the Zika virus and you live in Miami, the organization that funds those studies on, say, the Zika virus are funded by the National Institutes of Health. Or if you want cancer cures or Alzheimer's cures, the National Institutes of Health funds that research. So to talk about funding of research, there's government funding and there's private company funding. So if you think about like pharmaceutical companies do also do research. So there's private research that does all kinds of research into developing new cures for like Alzheimer's or cancer. But there's a problem between government funding and the corporate funding. Is corporate funding of research is always based on profit. So they're only going to fund projects on things that will generate profit. And so there's this gap in a lot of the things that we understand today about human biology, about physiology, were not discovered initially based on private corporations looking for profit. Does that make sense? So one of the things that in science, a lot of the new discoveries come about from people researching things that you wouldn't normally think are related to a cure. And then all of a sudden somebody connects the dots, okay, from that scientific discovery, and then you get a cure only later, after that initial discovery was first found. So the role of government funding in science is that the government has to provide a first initial spur into things that are going to be useful years from now. Right now they're not profitable, but in 20 years from now or 10 years from now or 5 years from now, they're going to hit a point where those scientific advances are going to start being applied directly into medicine. So that's the role of government, is to hit those early initial ideas, those early initial studies that haven't yet made it to the point where a corporation is going to take interest in them. Okay, so the National Institute of Health is the organization that funds that research, and the budget is very, very minimal. Okay, so I know what you're thinking. You're skeptical of government funding of anything. But let's talk about the first person who actually doubled the NIH budget was Newt Gingrich. So all the scientists are all super liberal and they all hate on Republicans. But it's funny that the only person who's ever successfully doubled the NIH budget was the great Newt Gingrich. So Newt Gingrich doubled the NIH budget, and his argument was this, is that basically the NIH is the organization that is going to get you to the point where you can find new cures. And if you find new cures for diseases, you reduce the cost of healthcare. So any money put into the NIH is essentially paid off. It's a high-risk investment, but it's essentially paid off in the long term because that research generates the new cures down the road. Okay? So it's an investment that pays itself off in the long run. So that's why he advocated for doubling the NIH budget. And he's also called just recently to double it again. Okay, and let me tell you why. So the baby boomers right now, so there's a massive population. I guess if you look at how many people are in how many generation, the baby boomers are this population where people came home from World War II, and then they made babies. And then there's this huge population spike with the baby boomers. And the baby boomers are just now hitting to the point where they're getting retired. And most of the costs of healthcare are for people in the last year of their life. So for instance, if you look at the average cost of how much somebody pays into their healthcare throughout their life. It's essentially zero until they hit the point where they're dying, and then they pay millions and millions and millions of dollars into their healthcare. So that's most of the costs of healthcare are in the last years of people's lives, okay? And the baby boomers are getting to the point now where they're starting to get old and they're starting to get all these aging problems, okay? And Alzheimer's, for instance, is this massive ticking time bomb where all the baby boomers are going to get Alzheimer's, or not all of them, but a lot of them are going to get Alzheimer's, and it's going to get to the point where our country is going to go broke because we don't have enough money to pay for the care of all these baby boomers in the end of the year of life. So Newt Gingrich's argument is we desperately need to find a cure for Alzheimer's, cure for cancer, things like that, to reduce the cost of healthcare. And so we need to double the NIH budget to hit the point where we can find those cures. Hey, what's up? If you have questions, you can just type them in. So I'm arguing for doubling the NIH budget. That's why. That's the argument. The other thing is, if you ask yourself, well, you're conservative and you think, well, where are we going to get that money from? Well, you could potentially take, so the military has this massive budget, and we all agree that the military should be funding things that help veterans even after they've fought in a war, okay? So it's totally reasonable to ask the military to put some money into funding the NIH budget, okay? And then that research can be directed toward helping problems that help veterans. So, okay, I'm going to answer your question in 1 second. So let me just finish here. Quick call to action. If you like the videos I've been making, you can follow, share, like. You can go to eaglewolfpack.com. You can donate. You can help vote for me in the primary. Okay, what was your question? Post your questions. Please help me to solve science questions. What's your science question? What's the question? We can treat this like office hours. You can come, you can ask Professor Beckmann for a question on your science. What's going on? What's the question? He's okay. I'm gonna give you a couple more minutes. Figure out your questions. Post them. Micro chapter. Okay, I'm a microbiologist. What's the question? What's the question in the microbiology chapter? What's up? Okay, the productivity of this has petered out.